Well, it's 2025, and I'm sure you'd agree that our nation, Canada, is at a pivotal point in our history. The question is during this nonstop onslaught of Trump policy changes and its impact on our country, what are we going to do about it? Well, isn't it about time that we Trump proof our economy? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Well, during this year, 2025, who would believe that we'd be in such a series of challenges? And of course, it's always a good thing to call good friends for advice. So, on that note, I wanted to ask my friend Thomas S. Caldwell his advice in terms of how should we go in terms of a vigorous policy path as we look to Canada's future. How do we Trump-proof our economy? So let's look at the policies that will create surely a more prosperous and free nation. So with me here today is Thomas S. Caldwell. He's the president of Caldwell Securities, and he's also the president of Urbana Corporation. A warm welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much, David.
Well, Tom, it's great to have you back, and I should just kind of set the table here a little bit, as they say, as we talk about our past conversation. It's hard to believe it's about 9 or 10 months ago, when back in May 2024, you took out a series of national ads, and you continue to do this as you have been known to do this, on behalf of really, I think, many Canadians that really aspire to the Canadian dream. And I wanted to play a little bit of a clip from that interview to kind of put into context that ad.
It's fascinating. It was a series of ads, and we'll display them up on the screen here, called "O Canada, Who Stands on Guard for Thee?" And it was a very powerful ad because you reflect on there was a time when so many things were in our country, and we'll go through those in a minute. But I wanted to ask you very simply, why did you decide to take out these full-page ads, basically expressing concern about our country and the need to protect our country?
I think many Canadians feel much the same way. I have a unique position in that, many people in large corporations feel much the same way, but they cannot say it. As an entrepreneur, and I'm chair of the companies that we mentioned, I have the scope to do that. And that means I can come under personal attack, or the corporations can. Bank presidents can't do that. So with this position comes the responsibility to say something. I talk to many, many, many people. I'm in the investment industry, clients, etc. And the feeling is universal. And it's not just people who are investors, but union people have been very supportive of what I've said as well. So it was something I really felt I should do.
Well, there you have it. It's a really interesting clip, isn't it, Tom? So do you feel any differently about your response from, 9 months ago in the age of this threat of Trump tariffs?
Yes, there is a change. I feel more so. More yes. Than what I felt. I'm sort of laughing, David, as you talk. I got fined the other day $4 because I was in a meeting, and in our meeting, anyone who mentioned the name Trump got fined $2.
Oh, no.
We're sort of letting him set the agenda when we have an agenda that we should be thinking of in terms of greatness, potential, and I the president. I keep saying the president because I'm worried about another $2 fine. It's a wake up call. He's a grow up call that we're for once we're seeing the potential, the possibilities we have, and we're talking about that, and that's a good thing.
Well, yeah. So in that context, let's up our game. Let's elevate the level of thinking. And I like that approach here where let's focus on building Canada. So it's in that spirit, I thought, well, let's give you a call, so to speak, and seek some wise wisdom and advice here in terms of what we should be doing. And I guess one of the things I do want to start, and please forgive me, I'm going to read a quote from the Bank of Canada, the governor, Tiff Macklem, who said that President Donald Trump's threats of new tariffs are already affecting business and household confidence, particularly in Canada and Mexico. Would that be a fair comment?
Oh, yes. I think people are anxious, they're concerned, and particularly not only in the sectors directly targeted, say autos, but all right across the country. This thing, being a 51st state, all of this stuff really affects our psyche, how we feel about ourselves. But the good news is we start to get a little angry, and getting a little angry, then you start to say, okay, let's go do something about this. And
Yeah.
we're starting to see things that need to, or finally we're having our politicians, and I use that word advisedly, starting to realize there's some reality here that we have to get involved in, policies
Mhm.
that work, that will build our country. So that's a really positive thing here. But this positivity is coming out of a sense of fear, anxiety, concern, whatever.
Mhm. Yeah, so this has really been a kind of a kick in our backsides to get our game together and get our policy house in order. And I guess it was interesting before you said, well, if anything, in retrospect, I feel even more strongly about the kinds of ads or vision I cast. So, I mean, just to be clear, you're a believer, and that's one of the things that struck me about our conversation last year, was you're a real strong believer, a patriot of Canada, but a believer in the Canadian dream. The sense that we should be the most prosperous free nation in the world. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely, absolutely. And part of that comes from the white hair you might have noticed in this interview. Uh, the generation ahead of me was, as Tom Brokaw said, the greatest generation. They lived through a depression. They fought a world war. They stood up against evil. They built the infrastructure of Canada, the highways, the airports, everything. And they passed that world on to my generation relatively debt free until we entered an era of where government started to buy votes with our money. And we've been in that ever since. But I look back and I had a great sense of pride in being a Canadian, the things we did, not just Vimy Ridge and Juno Beach and this stuff, but we built a country in a very harsh world, a harsh environment, if you will. So I guess the demeaning and diminishing of Canadian history in academia and in the political world has undercut that sense of pride. I don't know that younger people feel the same way, but if they don't, it's too bad because they're missing something great.
No, that's a great summary. So, Tom, when we look at the current affairs, I guess one of the phrases that comes to my mind is that Canada has an opportunity now to really up our game by getting back to the basics. What would be the basics? And I know that in our conversations, we can talk about, well, taxes to getting rid of red tape to really improving free trade across the country and improving energy in our nation. Would that be kind of the high level summary at a glance?
Everything. It's just everything.
Mhm.
Governments at all level have become far too intrusive in our lives. Governments are run by ideologues who've decided what's best for you and for me, despite the facts that their plans, their structures, their programs don't work. They still stick to it. And I think we need to have grown-ups that can say what's right for the people of this country. My granddaughter, we were having one of my granddaughters. I have a whole bunch of them. The youngest one said, the job of government is to invest in renewables."
Mm.
I don't know where you got that.
Interesting.
I said, I think the job of government is to establish the environment wherein the people that live in the country can realize their own greatest potential. That's the
Indeed.
job of government, not to invest in renewal. That's my job, to invest in stuff kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I think that's how they're all so conditioned these days. Every answer to every problem begins with the government, and it's not. But we've
Mhm.
been so conditioned to that, to be thinking in that way. And they create the problem and then they pretend to solve the problems. And it doesn't work that way.
So you're really looking at the big picture and
Yeah.
challenging us to think about the right balance between, well, the size of the government, the state, and really enabling the unleashing of Canadians to realize, well, as an entrepreneur or anyone, to realize their own dream. And so I guess the question I have is, um, are we so in that way we didn't get the basic principle right. We've gone overboard on having too much government. Is that a principle you'd say?
Too much government and too much control of micro issues.
Mm.
If even in the election world, everybody's got a program, another program. If
Mhm.
we reduce taxes on this, they're trying to use the economy to control outcomes and control what people do. I
Mhm.
think we should simplify the programs we have. That means less civil servants, by the way, to setting an environment, trusting the people of the country to build the country and do the stuff that's necessary. But our tax regime is very onerous at every single level,
Mhm.
and regulation in every single industry. I'm in the securities industry, and there is no capital market for new enterprise in this country. It's been obliterated by regulations that have gone geometric over the years, and so we spend half our time filling in papers, etc., as opposed to coming up with ideas and concepts. So it's
Wow.
every industry. It's not just the securities industry, which is off the Richter scale overregulated, but
Mm.
it's every other industry. And what's the net result of this? You know, we keep saying our biggest export is energy and autos. You know what our
Mhm.
biggest export is now? It used to be stand-up comics. Our biggest export now is really smart young Canadians. And
No
we can't
kidding.
be doing that. We cannot be doing that.
No.
I talk to young people in Canada, say, if you want to make some money, you got to go to the States. I mean, you can't
Oh
play in
my.
this mud puddle here. There's a big game going on. Get involved in the big game. And that's morally wrong for what we've been given.
Mhm.
So
Well, yeah. Okay. So this is a major problem that we're really not talking about in the public square is the departure of people. Like in order to build a great team, you not only have to have, well, a smart plan, good policy, but you need great people, in all different kinds of roles. But you need those persons that are going to help build that country. And so your observation is, and certainly a lot of stats show this, is we're losing a lot of tremendous Canadian leaders to the United States. That's the irony to this, isn't it?
absolutely. I've said for many years, Canada is a great country to start a business. It is not a good country to build a business. If you're going to build it, I'm involved very much in private equity, and I
Mhm.
will invest in relatively newer enterprises. And my liquidity moment, in the old days, it used to be an initial public offering where people could participate in this new business, if you will.
Mhm.
You can't do that in Canada anymore. The ecosystem has been destroyed through regulation, frankly. So you can't do that in Canada. My liquidity moment is selling the company. And 90% of the time, it's to a large US company. And that's just the way it is. That's the reality. And also, financing is done in private equity. So it's the big money investors that have a chance to participate. Not the smaller investor who can buy a couple of $1,000s worth of this new enterprise. So we've
Mhm.
bubble wrap people, but that's just our industry. It goes in every industry, and they're
Okay.
these interprovincial barriers. That's an obvious one, and there's one gorilla in the room that nobody likes to talk about too much is Quebec. Period. You want to be part of the company or not? I mean, you cannot, be buying Venezuelan and American oil and getting equalization payments from Alberta. I think Premier Smith is absolutely right. You know, you're part of us or you're not part of us. So these are there's a I
Wow.
don't the problems facing us are very large, and I do not know that we're going to solve them all. Politics is the art of 50% solutions, but even
Mhm.
moving in that direction would be positive.
Okay, so we've got a lot of work to do to get our country firing in all cylinders. I mean, you've just mentioned a number of things, one of which is this ecosystem idea. I mean, you work to lead up a large investment firm. So I've got a couple questions. You refer to this ecosystem. What do you mean by that? To help build and nurture businesses?
When I started our firm 40 years ago, there was about 100 similar companies. I think there's three now. I mean, there's the example right there.
Mhm.
Literally, the concept of new ideas and funding business, the mechanisms aren't there to do it. Even if raising it could be a good deal, the mechanisms really aren't there to do that. I went down to the prospectors and developers convention. It's a big mining thing in Toronto. So
Mhm.
I go down
Yes.
and I feel kind of sad when I go to because they're entrepreneurs, they're dreamers, and they're oddballs. I know because I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an oddball.
Mhm.
But they're brilliant ideas, they're dreams, they're hopes, and I feel like saying to them, the money isn't here for that. The money isn't available to you. You think it is because you think it's a great idea, but the mechanisms aren't there.
So you mean to say that I can't just go to my bank if I have an entrepreneurial idea, I just can't go to my bank and borrow the money?
Oh, you
Um,
can, but you have to put your house up as collateral and get your wife to sign off. I've had to do that several times over
oh,
my career.
well,
Banks use debt and they want their money back. Banks are an inappropriate environment for funding new enterprise because it's risk involved. and they don't
Mhm.
like risk. But they dominate the investment scene, ergo, risk is not accepted anymore. So that's part of
Mhm.
the mechanism we've created. That's just one example, but it extends across every other industry as well.
Okay, but you're giving us some, well, therapy in terms of understanding that I think a lot of Canadians would assume that Canada is a very business-friendly environment. That's not really
Absolutely.
true. I mean, I hear this all the time from
Absolutely
people.
not. It is
Not.
nowhere near that. It is not. NOT, period. Absolutely. We've had program. This country has been hostile to business, certainly for the last decade. You mentioned that who stands on guard for Canada. I talked about economic growth. There was a time when economic growth was given in Canada. I got
Yes.
more hate literature because of that. I should be shot. I should be in jail. I don't
Pardon
deserve
me?
to live. That was the one sentence because people equated that to being, quote, a climate change denier kind of thing.
No
So we're all
kidding.
been so conditioned in that. But the mere phrase of economic growth just fueled tremendous opposition. So that's the mindset. And that comes through, an absolutely bizarre academic world where kids
Mhm.
are not educated. They're just socially conditioned now. So they're conditioned. And so when someone talks about why do we, because if we grow the economy, guess what, kids? We can help people in need.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
if we, let me put it this way: we can't solve poverty and homelessness, but we're going to change the world's temperature. You know,
Okay, so you really do believe that, let's get on with the program of a growth economy, of prosperity. And I want to bring up a slide here because it's very interesting how it illustrates a powerful story. And this is growth based on GDP, or gross domestic product, per person or per capita in the last 10 years. And at the very top, in that little red block there, is Canada at 0.5%. And we run down from Germany to Italy to the Netherlands. Well, the Netherlands is at 14.3%. And of course, the United States at a whopping 20.7% growth. So why is this? Like when I first saw this graph a number of weeks ago, I was kind of shocked that we're at such a differential. It's like we're a growth laggard. Like what happened to Canada here? What's the problem here, Tom?
well, the problem is an anti-growth mindset at all levels of government, not just you like to blame the feds, but it's at the
Mhm,
federal level, at the provincial, and a municipal level. I mean, if you take Toronto, for example, we have bike lanes. Okay, bicycle people like that, but guess
mhm,
what? It's created horrendous traffic problems in Toronto. So no
mhm.
major company will locate a head office in Toronto. Downtown is hollowing out. I mean, I rode
Oh,
the
just
subway.
just hold on for a second. I don't want to lose that headline. So are you saying anecdotally, you rub shoulders with all kinds of decision makers that there's parties who just say, I don't want to locate downtown Toronto or other
Oh,
downtowns for that
absolutely,
matter, because it's
absolutely.
too painful to get around there because of these crazy bike lanes. Is
Our
that
company will not rent more space downtown. We will go satellite branches. We won't down. Listen, I rode the subway this morning. I had some big guy yelling and screaming every manner of invective, threatening me and everybody else getting on the subway. And that's the norm. Who's going to be? How many crazies do I get on my subway ride
Mhm,
today? I've
mhm,
given. I've given. I don't really have them in my pocket here. Yes, I've given bear spray to all the female secretaries and our female people in our office because
no
they feel
kidding.
threatened on Toronto subways. And then our idiotic mayor who says, oh, bike lanes are really helping traffic. I mean, ideologues ignore facts and ignore reality. And the point here is, if you go through the path, those are the underground shopping in Toronto,
Mhm,
25% of those stores are now boarded up. Restaurants don't open on the weekends because people don't come here. Now, that's at the municipal level. And that kind of
right.
mindset goes right through the provincial, which controls securities regulation,
Mhm,
controls and goes into the federal level with all kinds of little Mickey Mouse targeted projects that are going to
mhm,
change the world. We have to think in a bigger scale than that. Taxes and regulations, cut them all. Figure out how you're going to do it and figure out how you're going to do it. Whereas governments are, if you look at taxes in Toronto, the taxes on a house in Toronto have gone up 20% in the last year and a half. 20%.
mhm, mhm.
City councilors have just raised their salaries 24%, just a matter of weeks ago. So this is the attitude we have that government has got really out of control at all levels, and we just need to be more efficient. I'm not suggesting an Elon Musk here. Don't get me wrong.
Yes, right. No,
I'm just
but
trying to
let's
get to what normal should look like.
but you're calling for common sense here, and I just chuckle about the whole issue of bicycle lanes across Canada because I see them everywhere. I was just in Winnipeg, and I see bicycle lanes, and in Regina, I see them in Calgary. I mean, they are everywhere.
Yeah.
And, it's not like I'm against bicycling because I love it. I think it's a great thing to do. But let's be sensible here in terms of doing this, especially in a relatively, where are we again? Oh, yeah, in Canada, a relatively cold climate.
Yeah,
I
this
mean,
ain't
this is just
Denmark.
nuts. Yeah, no, it's crazy. So, but I think the larger point, though, that you do make, and you made this last time in our discussion, is the whole phenomenon of concentrated benefits of special interest groups who advocate for harebrained policies that are really not policies. They're not really workable. They don't work. And so they've kind of taken over the chicken coop, so to speak, with these special interest groups. And I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it, in our country, is that we've got a lot of special interests running the show of Canada, and it's hurting everybody.
Well, if you have governments that want to buy votes, they cater to special interest groups. We've just gone through a
Mm,
decade of that, of
mhm,
basically piecing off with our own money, people sort of doing this. So I think a lot of special interests are out there, but we have to think of the overall citizenry. What's going to enable people to realize their greatest potential, the
mhm,
possibilities? That's why people come to this country. They come to this country to build something, and we should give them that opportunity as opposed to grabbing as much as we can of the money they get on the way through.
mhm,
So I mean, it's a broader picture, uh, and it's one that's based on confidence in ourselves, confidence
mhm,
in the people. Canada is the people of Canada are great, well educated,
mhm.
positive, helpful. I was in my New York office some years ago and I banged into the wall and I apologized. And everybody said, that's the Canadian, but it's not that we're Mickey Mouse.
Mhm.
My son Brendan put a great ad in recently about Canadian values. And he said, our heroes it's not John Wayne, it's Terry Fox, the people
Mm,
that can endure and create and do something.
right on.
Toughness is not what you can inflict. Toughness is what you can endure and still
Mhm.
keep going. And we've got
I
that
like
message.
that.
We've got that message.
Well, and I think that Canadian attitude of endurance coupled with a can-do attitude really makes this nation incredible, and that's part of our team ethos and culture. So that's a very important thing to be aware of and promote that. So speaking of the attitude of Canadians here, if we look back, I can take a bit of temperature read on this. I mean, you're in the investment business. What's the mood of Canadians? I know that Nanos did a recent survey and said that there's a lot of Canadians don't really believe that the next generation has any chance of having a higher standard of living. Are you reading the same type of mood and ethos among the people you deal with?
Of course, there is a prevailing pessimism and also the good news, the prevailing realization that governments are not the answer. You get all these
Mm,
people who are, dealing with bread and circuses or whatever, if you will. Oh, it's wonderful, isn't this great? But that's not the reality on the ground. People judge their well-being by the ability to grow. I used to say many years ago, I could wash all the cars in the basement of our building every day, as long as one day I know I'm going to own all the cars in the basement. I can
yes.
put up with anything if I feel I'm building. And Canadians are like that. We can do anything.
Mhm.
This is the country that you can die in just by being left outside. We built an incredible country. So,
It's amazing.
but I think this pride, this confidence has been debilitated over the years by governments basically fostering it. Look to us and
Mhm,
we'll take care of you. Don't bother thinking. Don't bother. You don't need to work. We'll
mhm,
take care of you. And I don't know that that's helpful. I have to feel, and I think look at I got some wonderful young people working on it. They have to feel they're making progress. They're accomplishing something. A sense of
mhm,
pride. Give them challenges. Canadians need to be given challenges, saying we can build this. Here's what we're going to do, and everybody's got to work harder at it. Canadians would do that. I mean, I know enough. I travel this country from one end to the other, north, south, everything. I know lots and lots of, and I can see it. And as I say, I ride the subway. I know what people are thinking. I can tell by the look in their faces. There is a
mhm.
pessimism right now And this is a time where we require leadership,
Ah,
not political maneuvering or slagging the other guy, whoever he or she happens to be.
mhm,
I don't want to hear that stuff anymore. Everybody's
yeah.
flawed. That's why you go into politics. You're a flawed individual. That's why you do it.
Well, I tell you, I like your attitude, Tom, because you're challenging us, well, frankly, to focus on policy issues that are going to make a real difference in Canadian lives, not head fakes. But what you're also doing in a way is really challenging everybody to grow up as adults. Like adults look after their lives. They don't always look for a handout. I mean, that's a pretty basic principle, isn't it?
Absolutely. I have a picture in my wall of John Campbell, who was our legal counsel, who's long since passed away. John is a World War II veteran. He commanded 24 tanks. He was in something like 30 actions. He commanded a squadron of tanks in 30 actions, and he turned 21 the day the war ended. He did this
Wow.
as a 20-year-old. And now,
Astounding.
what's the phrase adulting? People don't grow up until they're in their 30s now, whereas
Mhm,
he had to
mhm.
grow up when he was 20 years of age and had to deal with stuff that was very, very hard for a young man. But they rose to the challenge, and people will rise to the challenge.
Mhm.
But you got to challenge them first.
Yeah, but let's remember that history. So when we look at Canada today, we've alluded to a lot of policy issues. I think one of the number one policy issues that we face is, quite frankly, is affordability. The concern that there's been a lot of inflation in this country. What's the short answer as to why we have inflation?
Government spending money like drunken sailors,
Hmm.
and they print them. And like it or not, if you America, the inflation they can control because it's a world reserve currency. It goes out in the world under people's mattresses. They have it. It funds
Yeah.
world trade. But in Canada, we are a closed society, and we're dependent on the United States far more than we should be. And we have governments that come up with policy after policy after policy, and tax after tax after tax. For
Mhm.
example, in Toronto, if you buy a condominium or a house, 30% of the cost of that new house goes to government in some form of taxation. And they're always talking, oh, about affordability of houses, yet they grant themselves a 24% increase. So inflation, it's a double speak. And they always try to play off the rich, the poor, the middle class.
Mhm.
There's only two classes, contributors and non-contributors. If you make your policies for contributors, yes, we need to help people who can't contribute. We don't have to be as generous with people who won't contribute. But my
Mhm.
point here is policies for the contributors, and that will create enough money to help people in need. I mean, that's really where it's a
Mhm.
different mindset.
Mhm. Okay, so inflation doesn't come from the producer or the consumer. It comes from government printing too much darn money. I mean, that's the story here. As what is our deficit now federally alone? I think it's well over $60 billion. It's just remarkable. I would never thought I would see it that high.
I couldn't have dreamed it as well, but nothing surprises me anymore. And if you look at a breakdown of where that money's gone, I'm not going to go into details now, but a major portion went to special interest group, singular
Mm,
group.
yeah.
And so, and it's done to buy votes. You're buying votes with our money. So if you
Mhm.
start splashing money all over the place, and the salary level and the benefit level at the government level is off the Richter scale versus the private sector. And guess what? You have trouble getting people to work 3 days a week. 3 days
Wow.
a week, and so why wouldn't you have inflation? You
Yeah.
know,
No, exactly.
so we what's that old cliche? The chickens are finally have come home to roost. And the
Mhm.
U.S. president, I won't mention his name because I don't want a $2 fine,
Okay.
but he has provided a wake up call to say, see what happens. Warren Buffett has a great line when it comes to investing in companies. He said, when the tide goes out, you can see who's swimming naked, and the tide has gone out, and now we can see the flaws in what we
Ah,
have. So that's a good thing.
okay.
It's a
All
good
right.
thing if we do something about it.
I think you're right on. You mentioned earlier about getting free trade within Canada. I think a lot of Canadians would frankly be shocked that we don't have free trade across Canada. And depending on the calculations, that can represent easily 3 or 4% of our GDP. That would mean thousands of dollars in everybody's pockets as Canadians. So why the heck don't we have free trade in this country?
Because we tolerate regionalism and special interest groups. And, if you have, say, not to pick on Quebec, but they've got to decide, are we a country or are we not a country? And if we're not a country, we might as well join the states. But for example, here's a province that benefits from equalization payments from Alberta and their oil and gas. However, they have never in my lifetime bought one Alberta oil. They buy their oil from Venezuela and the United States, even though a tanker ran the ground off Gas Bay last year, spilling Venezuelan oil all over the place. So they won't buy our oil, Canadian oil. They'll buy it from foreign entities, and they get equalization payments from Alberta. Oh, and by the way, we will not allow a pipeline to go across Quebec with oil or gas so we could have LNG plants in the Maritimes and export to Europe where it's demanded, they need oil. And the same in the West Coast. We're getting the first plant just coming on stream. They've been talking about that for the last 30 to 40 years. And
Bizarre.
Regional groups saying, oh, no, it's going to interfere with the salmon or something like that. So are we a country or are we not? And if we want to live off the fat of the land and be dependent on Americans, that's fine. That's what we've been doing, actually. But I think
it's kind of an outrageous situation when another province is really preventing other provinces, like, well, it's not just Alberta, but Saskatchewan. You've got Alberta, BC as well. I mean, a number of provinces could be exporting way more oil and gas to the larger world market, getting world market prices.
Absolutely.
And yet we're not. I mean, it's dysfunctional, and that's costing Canadians a lot of money because we don't get world market prices. Is that a fair comment, Tom?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's just, we've got all these idiotic barriers to protect that little group or protect some particular language rights or whatever. And somebody's got to blow through this and say, you know what, this is over. You got to do that. But that takes a risk. And politicians won't take that risk. Politicians will not risk losing votes because the goal of every politician is to get reelected. And what kind of money do I have to splash around? What do I have to tolerate to get those votes? A leader is someone who stands up for what they believe in and saying, I know it's unpopular. This is what we're doing, and here's where we're going. And I think Canadians would rise to that challenge if they could. But we've tolerated this basically selfishness. We've tolerated, and the major government, the federal government, has got to say enough of this already, and whatever we have to do to make it happen, do it. And we're not going to solve all these problems. They're so large, they're so embedded. I won't be here to see them solved if indeed they are ever solved. But even partial movement in that direction is going to be positive.
So use the word tolerant of these kinds of dysfunctional, frankly, I don't use this word often, but crazy public policy. Yeah. That we would allow this kind of, well, for example, this price differential, because we only have one primary customer, namely the United States for our oil and gas, we don't get full market price because we're not selling to Japan and Germany and all these other markets. So we actually leave on the table a horrendous amount of money. I think that over the last 10 years, it's been at least $400 billion. And don't quote me on that because there's different ranges of figures here, but we can figure that out, that figure. The point is, are we as Canadians so tolerant of these dysfunctional policies because we're not aware about how they impact us? Like, I think for a lot of Canadians, they're just simply not aware of this world, and they don't realize that that's why we have such a big income differentiation between our incomes are so much lower than, well, say the lowest state, I believe is Mississippi. Yep. In Ontario, the average family's income differential is some $30,000 difference, Tom. I mean, this is huge. Yep. But Canadians don't understand this, do they?
Well, it's partly, it's the fault of an uninformed populace, which means the media. The media just goes along with party lines, whatever party they happen to be supporting. They go along with whatever is going. There's not any in-depth journalism anymore on any topic, as far as I can see, or any serious analysis of what's actually happening. Just take a look at the Trans Mountain Pipeline. It's just started. It's opened up just recently. That was originally a $5 billion project. I think it ended up, give or take, 35 to 40 billion because of protests out there. And by the way, I think those protests were funded by U.S. companies to keep Canadian oil off the market. But we tolerated that. And when I mention tolerance, the only parallel I can think is in the area of substance abuse, alcohol or drug abuse, they use the phrase an enabler,
Oh,
enable.
yes.
And our governments have enabled this dysfunctionality just to buy votes for themselves. Period. It's not complex.
Bizarre.
This is not Mensa stuff.
Yeah. Well, and ironically, they've enabled the funding, the pocketing of, well, you tell me who they are exactly, but rich US based oil refiners to pocket the difference because they refine the cheaper Canadian oil and then they sell it for a larger profit at world price. I mean, it's crazy, isn't it, Tom?
Well, I don't know how the mechanics work, but conceptually, yes, it is crazy, and it's because of all these choke points we have, and we only have basically one major pipeline, the Trans Mountain, that takes oil out.
Hmm.
There should be
Hmm.
several going in different directions. We could be a world energy superpower, and again, somehow or other. For example, I always thought it was amazing that everybody objected to natural gas. Natural gas is one of the most efficient heat providers, energy providers ever. Never mind electricity or anything
Hmm.
else. It is the most efficient. And by the way, in the third world, emerging world, it replaces coal. But it was always
Hmm.
amazing to me that the environmentalists opposed natural gas being exported anywhere. It's just, it doesn't fit with reality.
You know, it's interesting. One of the talk that has risen now is that if our is the whole idea of utility corridors, the idea that you could have wide swaths of land of, say, 5 kilometers, where you would have a myriad of products being traded and moved across the West to Tidewater. For example, one proposal is to move a corridor from across Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba to Port Nelson in the Hudson's Bay. So we can get products going in every way: electricity, grain, and even oil and gas. And this could involve First Nations, it could mean prosperity. But why, if our country is in a national crisis, why wouldn't we have started that yesterday? Because that could mean hundreds of billions of dollars of wealth for everybody in this country. Isn't
Well,
that a
and
no-brainer?
No, well, it isn't, but you're starting to see with the warming of the Arctic, Hudson Bay is going to become a viable shipping point at some point. So maybe my beachfront property in Hudson's Bay might be worth something. I'm joking here, but that's obviously a course. But keep in mind, the president of the United States is very concerned about the freeing up of the Arctic Passage. It cuts
Mhm.
2 weeks off of China shipping to Europe, for example. They want to be involved in that. They don't consider that Canadian waterways. They consider international waterways.
Mm,
Well,
mhm.
there's a different. This is part of this game we're currently living through about a 51st state. We're talking about the Arctic here, so yes, that does present a significant opportunity to Canada. And remember, that's how the Hudson's Bay Company got started. They shipped
Yes,
goods into Hudson's Bay, and the indigenous could bring their furs north because they couldn't go through Iroquois country because they'd all be slaughtered.
exactly.
And that's remember they all weren't
Exactly.
nice people. They
Yes.
did it through Hudson's Bay, and they would ship the pots and pans and whatever and trade it for beaver, and then that's how it got built. So maybe we're returning to our roots. Who knows?
Yeah, let's get back to the Hudson's Bay as we close some of those Hudson's Bay stores. I mean, it's really quite ironic, isn't it? So, I mean, part of this whole energy debate and discussion is really quite interesting because we know that energy is one of our ace cards. It's our largest exporter. It's a cornerstone to our economy, and yet we've got this war on Canadian energy. And I guess my question is, isn't that an industry that we should be embracing to really rebuild this country? I mean, that is a kind of a foundational element for everything. It's not just oil and gas, it's manufacturing, it's forestry, it's mining, it's everything that we want to do as a country, is it not?
Well, we are essentially a natural resource provider, or should be. But most of our major mining companies are taken over by foreign companies. Inco, Alcan. These companies are no longer Canadian. These were cornerstones in Canada. Uh, but we are a natural resource country in every area, whether it be in grain, whether it be in canola, whether it
Mhm.
be in lumber, whether it be in mining. But again, a mine. I have some interest in the mining area, and we have a gold prospect. I don't know if it's going to become a mine or not. But if it became a mine, That mine will not go into production for at least 17 years. 17 years. That's the general turnaround to get in production. And that comes back to this regulation thing. So the industries like autos, those have been a great add-on. They're wonderful for our country. We're trying to diversify from natural resources, but it may be that we have to drop back and really build the resource component of our economy and work our way back out from there. Because all these projects that governments come out with, like a high-speed train to Quebec City, I mean, why, for God's sake? I mean, and you know, these government projects are just boondoggles. Let us build on what we have, and we can build an incredible country by doing it. But we got to cut down the time involved in getting things into production, into mainstream. But we're a resource economy. Start with that and build our way back.
I think you're right. So if we're to build out our resource economy and frankly every business within our country, the issue of taxation comes to mind. And I mean, I know that we've talked before about the whole capital gains situation, and I know that there's been decisions to try to, well, increase it. And now we've heard announcements by a variety of parties that they want to decrease it. All I know is that in Canada right now, and there are exceptions, namely Alberta and Saskatchewan, we have a combined tax for Canadians of well over 50%, a combined tax being federal, provincial taxes, let alone other taxes. If you were king for a day, Tom, what would you change in terms of our tax system today to really get this country moving again?
Well, I would reduce taxes at literally all levels, not only at the income tax, because remember, you mentioned it's 55%. If you add in your house tax, your HST, your GST, and all these other taxes, I mean, the carbon tax was a classic one. You paid tax on the carbon tax, you know, taxes on taxes. I mean, I would cut taxes across the board, and I would look to government to say, I want simpler programs and I don't want Mickey Mouse little programs. Like we're starting one now. Oh, capital gains could be reduced if you buy a Canadian company. You can't be targeting like this. You know, just keep it simple. If I
Yes.
had, I would, I think that would be my, if I ran for politics, I would, which I've never been tempted to, by the way, I would say keep it simple would be my mantra. And that goes for taxes and regulations and everything else. Allow people to grow and to build and to accumulate wealth. And as you accumulate wealth, you can do all kinds of neat things. I mean, I've been very fortunate and very blessed, might I say. We fund an orphanage in Bombay, in India, 30 little girls. We've done that for years and years, and we can do stuff. And I know lots of people who have had some good fortune in their lives, and no, all of them are benefactors and giving money out and trying to build this country. You're not talking about rapacious, you know, somebody twirling his mustache foreclosing on mortgages. Yeah, you might have some of those, but by and large, most people try to give back because we've been also
Sure.
blessed in this country.
But the point is that if we end up remitting over half our government, so many Canadians do that. I know that there's some others that don't pay anything and benefit. And you know, we want to be a caring society, but ultimately, if you don't have any incentive, e.g., you're not keeping half your income, that really is part of our low productivity story, is it not, as a country?
It's part of our low productivity story, the important part. It's also part of our low morale start as well. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's you feel you can't get ahead. That's why younger people are thinking about the United States. That's why people just say, well, I can't get ahead here. I can't accumulate wealth here.
Mm-hmm.
And accumulating wealth is not a bad thing. You know, you want to encourage people to do it. That's why
Mm-hmm.
you're in a country. It's the framework where you can create and add jobs and add productivity. I started this firm. I started our firm. I don't know. I think I had about $1,000, and I borrowed everything on my house. We have 60 some odd people. We made an investment in a company that enabled a whole new industry to develop that created 150,000 jobs and $15 billion in GDP. And that investment was a $6 million investment. They do not understand how the system works. I can't think of any government program that's even come close to that. So,
Wow.
you know, and the point is, I get whacked at significant. I mean, I can't die because my capital gains tax was going to be too high. I got to stay living for a long time. So we got to enable people to realize their potential. That's really all I'm saying. And keep it simple will enable them to do so.
Right on. So You've also alluded to the importance of, well, education as an example, where we've got to not only skill people up with the ABCs, but we need to get them into the sciences and to technology. And I guess one of the things I've noticed is that when it comes to Canada, we really have infected our educational systems both at the elementary school level all the way up to universities with this whole ideology of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I guess my question is this: is that a problem if it detracts from, well, principles of merit? I mean, isn't that part of the Canadian dream? Is that we've undermined that fundamental core principle of, well, pursuing life based on merit?
DEI is racist, period. Okay.
Mm,
Our
yeah.
company is probably one of the most diverse in the investment industry. We have people from everywhere, from every manner of background, and we'd still be in trouble because we don't have a policy. Our policy is to hire the best people we can, and the diversity takes care of itself. There's
Mhm.
some bright people from, and I have a tremendous regard for people who come to this country because they've given up their language, their culture, their family,
Indeed.
their friends to build something, to come here to build something. And by the way, what is interesting, if you come as an immigrant, you're on your own. If you come as a refugee, we just pour money at you, and there's this dichotomy. I have a lot of people
Yeah.
that just come. And I would say in our company, I would say uh, 70 to 80% are either brand new Canadians or first generation Canadian. I'm first generation Canadian. So DEI policy is saying, well, clearly you're not up to snuff and we have to make special allowances for you.
Mm,
I'm
mhm.
responsible for people's money. I'm responsible for their investments. I got to have the best people I have working for me. And in so doing, the diversity is taking care of itself because there's lots of smart people. The smart people aren't white old guys like me. There's all kinds of really bright people that have come to this country.
Mhm.
That stuff. But let me give you a quick example. I went to the public school system in Toronto. I went to Runnymede Public School, and then I went to what was then the worst high school in Toronto. I won't name it. And if you got to grade 10 in my school, you were an intellectual heavyweight. But my
Okay.
education is far better than anybody I've had. I have PhDs working for this firm who are functionally illiterate. They're not talking English. Forget about history. They have no idea what this country was based upon. And that, if you delete your history, you deplete your confidence in yourself for the future. You live on the people that went before you, trying to match
Mhm.
up to them.
Mhm.
So I say I went to a very, very, and I did continue on. I went to McGill and graduated in economics and philosophy, which makes me functionally useless. But
Okay.
but my point is, I got a good basic education, and I have
Mhm.
to proofread research reports written by people with degrees way beyond me because they're not educated. They're socially conditioned, but not. And I blame academia for that. And the caliber of teaching has gone way, way, way down. And in my day, the teacher was really great status. He was up there with the doctor, the lawyer, the priest, etc. The teacher was a big deal. If you got whacked by your teacher, you got whacked again at home. And that whole thing has changed now. That kids are not learning anything substantive to help them in the world. I look at my grandkids. They're taking what I call the unemployment degrees, the humanities and something like that. I saw a young gal on Avenue Road, a little girl. She has a helmet on, and she's on the. And I don't even know the kid, but I'm really proud of her. She's out doing something as opposed
Mhm.
to wondering about indigenous problems and whatever, all this other stuff.
Mhm.
And there are problems, and people need to do that. But don't get me wrong. Let's go do something real, and that's the
So,
education system.
okay, so well said. So within that context, though, there seems to be that theme. Let's get back to the basics, the ABCs, the skills, but let's also teach our nation's identity and story. Let's teach civics again. I mean, it sounds like we need to. I mean, I don't understand why we would not teach civics anymore in our school system. It seems like we're really letting down not only ourselves, but the next generation.
Canada is a wonderful story, a wonderful story. There's so much to it. There's so much mosaic to it. For example, if you were indigenous or a royalist, you had to get out of the United States at the Revolution because you were slaughtered. That was a genocide, make no
Mhm.
mistake. If you were a slave in the United States, you were not free if you got to the northern states because you had to be sent back. You were chattel. You weren't free until you got to Canada. You know,
Right on.
this was
Yes.
the steam valve for America. This is where
Mhm.
people came to have freedom. There's a museum, an exhibit at the ROM about Auschwitz. If you were in Auschwitz in that concentration camp, if you were moved to duty that might keep you alive, like sorting clothes, it was described as, I'm going to Canada. That was the dream of people. I'm going to Canada. And that's just part of our stuff. I'm not talking about punching beyond our weight in world wars or anything else, but this is a place that provided people freedom to grow. And we've forgotten that stuff, and not one thing I said has been taught in school.
Right on. So let's remember our history and celebrate it and learn from it as well. I mean, no nation is perfect, that's for sure. So one of the things that also strikes me about our conversation, Tom, is that we really have an opportunity to develop prosperity for everybody, and but yet one of the things I come across regularly, and it's astounding how often it comes up, is I meet this unique class of people that are relatively new immigrants to this nation. Maybe they've been here maybe a year or two, and they're kind of sad. They're looking at going back because they said, you know what? I don't know why I'm here. I can't get ahead. I don't have any hope of getting ahead.
There's a lot
And
of
those
that.
people are moving. And are you seeing that as well? Because I know the stats are showing
Absolutely.
a record
Absolutely.
number of immigrants going back to where they came from.
This had promise, and we haven't lived up to it. I have a client who came from a communist country, and she said, I came from a socialist country, and this country's even worse. She said, it's just getting ridiculous. I wonder why I came here. I should have gone to America. And a lot of immigrants are feeling that way. And that's we've robbed ourselves of our pride, of our history, and our possibilities. And the problem here we have, I believe, this is just my own 2 cents worth, but we have politicians. We need leaders. And I don't see on the horizon an inspirational, visionary, hey, we can do this on the world stage. I hear little Mickey Mouse policies. I hear slagging each other. I don't want to hear that stuff. Where is the leadership coming in this country? And I'm speaking right across the political spectrum.
Okay, so within that whole discussion about leadership, and I think you're very much articulating a point that I think is resonating with Canadians. This is a pivotal point in our nation's history. There's no doubt about it.
Yep.
And I guess what I'm asking you, Tom, is from our leadership class, we need both an inspiring discussion about these public policy choices, but one that puts it on the line and says Canada really needs to not only grow up, but we have to make transformational changes to realize the potential of the Canadian dream. Is that what you're getting at?
Absolutely. You're bang on. That's exactly what we need. And I don't know that it's come across to our political class. They're still playing silly bears, splashing in a mud puddle, and there's a tsunami wave coming. And that's the thing that concerns me. We can have a real say in the world as a mid power. People look to us and they're kind of disappointed, that we're not what we could, should, and might be. And it comes down to we've been let down by our political class of all stripes, by the way. They're just
Indeed.
selfish, self-absorbed people feathering their own nest to try to stay in power instead of accomplishing something great. Maybe they just can't think great anymore. Maybe though, I get, here's how I try to content myself. Maybe leaders will emerge. If you take a look at Churchill was considered an alcoholic, self-promotive, flipping sides both ways. Yet at the right moment, he emerged as the leader. And so maybe leaders will emerge out of this, that they'll catch a vision of what we can be. I hope that's the case.
Indeed. So let's talk a little bit about leadership. As some play checkers, we need to play chess. You've done a lot of negotiations. And if we look at our current state of affairs, we notice that Canada and the United States, as the United States negotiates with so many others as well, is laying the groundwork for larger negotiations, whether we like it or not. They are restructuring their nation in the United States as they face large deficits and debts, as they look at all kinds of grievances, as they call us out as a NATO laggard and all the rest. But let's talk about negotiations. Because as we look at our relationship with the United States, we're dealing with a giant, a superpower. Um, the amount of trade that we make with them is on a much smaller scale than certainly their economy. I mean, they're some 11 times larger than ourselves. It's known as asymmetrical negotiation. So, what cards do we have to play during this time of negotiation with the United States? A giant. How would you approach this negotiation, Tom?
Well, let me quote Don Regan. Don Regan was the president of
Mhm.
Merrill Lynch, and he went on to
Yes.
be White House chief of staff for Ronald Reagan. I knew him personally. And one day at lunch, he said to me, referring to the US, never get into a stamping fight with an elephant. And that
Mm,
would be my point here is if you're in negotiation, you don't play the other guy's game. You're clear, you're reasonable, and you just stay your ground and you don't get goaded into idiocy. And the confrontational thing is, confrontation with an elephant doesn't work.
mhm,
You know, my son Brendan had a great Canadian values in a time of a trade war, and he said basically we shouldn't be trying to increase tariffs. You see, Premier Ford tried to, oh, we're going to increase electricity 25%. And then
mhm,
Trump said, okay, no problem, 50% now on aluminum. And okay, now we backed it off. We look like idiots. The point here is you don't play the other guy's game. Well, you can say, you know what? You're increasing tariffs all over the world. You're scaring the heck out of your trading partners and your military allies. Canada is a free trading country. We believe free trade has brought immense wealth across the world, raised people up. We're going to stay to that. We're going to keep our tariffs as they are. In fact, we're going to start to reduce them because we are a world trading country. Go exactly. It's like judo, taking your opponent's momentum and just diverting it, if you will. But I think that's the negotiation. But everybody wants to cloak themselves in the flag by being a tough guy. That's just for the domestic audience. That's
mhm.
not going to achieve anything with this guy, anything. But it'll be interesting to see what he does come up with. In fact, because there's a lot of inflammatory rhetoric. I still think the feeling is he's going to back off to some degree.
Okay, so we need to be smart in terms of our negotiations. And this is part of what I refer to as Trump proofing our economy, is not only getting back to the policy basics, like whether it's energy, taxes, regulation, and all the rest, but it's also the tactics and strategy by which we negotiate with our largest trading partner. So, my question is also, shouldn't we understand where the United States is coming from? I mean, I think there's a lot of rhetoric that's going on that says that somehow this is all just coming out of the blue. This isn't. This has been bubbling now for quite some time. So we need to understand that well, for example, if the Americans see security as a primary issue, not a secondary one, then we've got to get with the program on our NATO contractual obligations because we don't meet them, do we, Tom?
Nowhere near, and we haven't in the past. All we've done is talk. There's a phrase in America, and I sat in a defense think tank in Ottawa for many years as a director. I've been in Afghanistan with our battle group, and there's an American phrase: Canadians will offer you every assistance short of real help. And it's all rhetoric, it's all talk. Our governments for several years have done this. That we're in a dangerous world. And by the way, if you're not participating in defense of the free world, you do not have a voice in world trade. You don't
Ah,
have a,
that's it.
you don't have a voice in anything else. You're just seen as a mooch, and we are and have been, and we have never been mooches. We punch way beyond our weight in so many areas, and including Afghanistan. So the point is, we have acquired this reputation through neglect and cheapness, if you will, or trying to spend money to buy votes and other matter, because defense is not a big vote getter necessarily. But you have to participate if you want a voice at the table in any other issue, trade, security, anything, human rights. You don't have a voice unless you got a couple of chips in the game and you're playing at the table with the big kids. And
Okay,
that's what we've missed.
so it
No say.
sounds
You know
like
what I say.
so it sounds like we've been called out on a number of issues, including legitimately our failure to meet basic contractual obligations in NATO. I had a recent conversation with my friend Lieutenant General Michel Maisonneuve about this very issue. It's like Canada has withdrawn from the world stage. And so we're left there. We can't even participate in military exercises because we don't have interoperability, because we don't have the equipment. We don't have anything to offer. So this is a major embarrassment. The Americans see through this as well as every other ally. And we don't seem to connect the dots that if you aren't at the security table, you're not at, as you say, the economic table.
You're not General Masonov is absolutely right. I had dinner with him 2 nights ago, and but he's absolutely correct. But you don't have to be a military person to know that. You can be a diplomat. You can be anything to do in politics. If you're not participating in security, you're not participating in anything else. Not just trade, anything else. Nobody listens to you.
But our political class doesn't get this, do they?
Well, they don't want to because they'd rather buy votes for their particular parties, whatever one they happens to be, by just piecing the money off somewhere else. There's a certain amount of dues we have to pay to be living in the free world. And that dues, we have not been paying our dues. And the Europeans call it the Canadian solution, where you don't do anything and you expect the Americans to come and take care of you. I think America's quite right in that. I mean, within all the rhetoric coming from the States, there's a lot of unjust and exaggerated nonsense.
Sure.
But within that, there's some grains of validity, if we will.
So would you say it's a fair comment to say that our country's at a crossroads, Tom? Will we grow up? Is that the question?
We're either going to go forward or going to go backward from here.
So why do you speak up? Why are you doing these ads? Why do you care about this country, Tom?
I care about the country because it's wonderful to me. And listen, I'm 81 years of age. I'm going to be croaked soon. I'm not going to be around for all this stuff. I want to lay you something better, share what I possibly can. I have the opportunity to speak out, and I will. And yeah, I'm going to get some flack for it. I have done in the past. I don't care. It doesn't matter. This is an important thing to do. And as I think I said in the previous interview with you, a lot of people in the corporate world can't do this. I can do it because they can't fire me right now. So, and I'm closer to the exit than I am to the entrance of this game. And I want to try to leave something a little bit better and say, share, because, there's a wonder. I am so proud of this country. This is the best country. And it breaks my heart to see the lack of leadership that we've had in this country for many, many years, the smallness. Think big, dream big, and then get on with your dream.
Well, Thomas S. Caldwell, it's been a pleasure to talk with you today and for challenging each and every one of us as Canadian citizens to speak up, to be proud not only of our country, but to also be there to think through these policies issues for the sake of the next generation. So thank you so much, Tom.
David, thank you for the opportunity, and God bless you and all the work you're doing in this regard, because I know you're at night and day. So thank you. And thank you for including me.
Thank you so much, Tom.
We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.